All right, I just want to cover the basics of this soloing exercise without getting overly intricate about it. Essentially, the key's in G major, right? Which tells us it's going to be E minor, which gives us this pentatonic position, right? Of course, I might as well start off with G major pentatonic. Taking this note, of course, from Locrian, 3 notes per string there, right? So I'm just basically adding that extra note there to really let me come back and rest on this previous note, so then I can build my next idea, which comes from the 3 notes from essentially Dorian, 3 notes per string. All right, that I'm just doing, which puts me squarely into the Dorian positions, pentatonic, right? And of course, I'm doing this. So this comes from the major scale, 3 notes per string right there. And these ones coming from, of course, the Dorian pentatonic. So I'm just combining them. Chromaticism, the major scale again in the classical position there. Dunsky, right? So that's the whole first part there, is basically ascending Ionian position using the pentatonic, and then descending using the Dorian position, a little bit of chromaticism, and essentially filling in some of the blanks with the modal notes, if you will, right? So again, I'm sort of ascending this, setting it up, right? And that's when I can start to do this little fancy run down. But notice I'm going to end back in the Ionian position. That gives me the chance to now move down to this destabilizing note, essentially Locrian. Ascend, 3 notes per string, of course, getting into Dorian position again. Pentatonic, again, pentatonic here, Phrygian, Mixolydian pentatonic, right? And then, okay, that's basically 3 notes per string using the Mixolydian 3 notes per string position here. All right, again, everything we're doing is played diatonically, meaning I haven't actually gone outside the key of G major, right? And since I'm already doing this, I might as well tack on, of course, old faithful there, the G major 7 arpeggio, right? And then I'm like, might as well jump back into the pentatonic chromaticism again, more chromaticism, right? So on and so forth, right? And of course, at the very end here, I do this kind of cool run where I'm ascending using Dorian. Whoops, there, right? And then I jump to the next position. Keep it going, jump to the next position. That's going to be Mixolydian. And just ending it there. So it's another sort of like 3 octaves idea there, where essentially I'm starting with this whole step configuration, then moving to the minor third configuration, 2 more whole steps and minor third. And then I just kind of doodle off with a slightly less involved sort of minor pentatonic major scale sort of idea. But that right there is the essentials. Moving up in the Ionian position, pentatonic, right? And then jumping into this Dorian position, but filling in the blanks. Right? Ending in the major, going up, Locrian, 3 notes per string, into Dorian pentatonic, into the Phrygian pentatonic, into Mixolydian, into Mixolydian, 3 notes per string, of course, G major 7 from the Aeolian position, back to Aeolian, back to Mixolydian, minor pentatonic. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting most of this out here, right? And then, of course, diving down, and you could have done a whole bunch of things. You could have maybe jumped into this minor 7 arpeggio into the major 7, or the minor 7, I should say minor 7 flat 5 there, diminished essentially, right into this minor 7. And then maybe down to the minor 7 again in the Locrian position that lets you end again in the major position here with close either to the root or to the third of the scale that you're working in, which is going to be incredibly beneficial as far as either closing your idea with home bass or leaving it open to do more soloing. Right? Those ending notes are incredibly important. That's like musical punctuation. Don't skip over it. There, I'm going to leave that one there. Let's move on to the next example. All right, with part 2 here, essentially I go with more of a diatonic approach, so I'm using a lot more scales and things like this, like 3 notes per string and all the rest of that, and just occasionally using the pentatonic scale as opposed to the first one where it was mostly pentatonic in nature, kind of like, you know, fusion-y blues or whatever. But the key here is we've moved to C major now, which puts me into A minor for the relative minor, of course, right? So that's very important information, of course. From there, what I did was essentially be like, I want to start off with this G Mixolydian position. Right, 3 notes per string kind of deal. So I was like, and then I want to sort of like break out of this sort of scalar technique and instead jump into this, essentially this Baroque technique, if you will, where it's like the classical guys. Right, and then move down to the next position, right? Now listen, that one's in the Mixolydian, this one down here is in the Dorian position. That's how I see it, kind of situation. It's up to you to learn them for yourself. There's no point in me sitting here going through each one point by point, because you're just going to have to sit there either on your own and be like, these are the notes I have to work with, and then go next one, next one, next one, next one, next one, until you get good at it, kind of situation. Then move to the next position. You're like, I'm in Lydian now, right? So instead of having this, you're gonna have, and moving down to the next position, you're gonna have Phrygian, and then you'll have that configuration of notes, and you'll have to figure out each position. Trust me, there's no better practice exercise. If you're talking about wasting a half an hour worth of, you know, your life or whatever it is, just essentially playing the guitar, then that is one of the best things you can actually do, because you'll learn so much in the span of just 1 year. Your ears will develop so significantly that you'll have no problems basically picking up this stuff and being like, I know exactly what they're doing, and then just essentially transmute it into how you would play it. That's the trick. I love the big ones, Lynch and Van Halen and Randy Rhoads and all the big guys, right? But I don't sound really like anything like them to a certain degree. Of course, we're always borrowing from them, and that's what you have to keep in mind. Your individualism on the instrument is incredibly important, right? So I'm just doing this descending and ascending idea using the Baroque stuff. From there, I'm essentially doing an ascending C major scale using thirds, right? So I've ended here kind of deal, climbing up the scale. Right, then come back down. Right, and from there I can now do this descending sort of arpeggio run, because I'm in the Phrygian position. There's the first inversion major. That's a minor. That's a major there, right, essentially. And then, of course, I think I do a series of thirds using the Mixolydian position. Again, notice me mixing and matching all the techniques there, right? From that point on, I'm essentially jumping into an arpeggio sequence. I'm going to start off here, and since I'm basically playing the first degree here, C, I was like, instead of playing C major, I'm going to sneak in this C minor 7 inversion, right? And then jump down here to the Locrian position, and then sneak another minor 7 one in, but the one based on Phrygian. So you get this sequence. Jumping down a whole step again, Aeolian, in this case, minor 7, then recycling that Ionian one, essentially considering this 5th degree here, G Mixolydian, now G Ionian. Let your imagination run wild on that one, what I just did there, essentially flip-flop them, right? All I did was either superimposition, if you will, which is how I like to see it. You're essentially taking a similar scale shape, Ionian and Mixolydian, and just flipping them around. That's it. And when I do that, I see this now as the 1st degree rather than the 5th degree. And when it's the 1st degree, I have a whole new set of choices. I have this arpeggio, for example, there, or the major 7. Essentially, of course, we have dominant 7 there is also happening, right? And there's other ones too, of course, lots of them. So that's why that becomes incredibly important. So that's really the, a big part of the sequence right there. Essentially the idea of mixing and matching the techniques, this sort of hybrid, to get the sort of technical proficiency. And then you're, of course, working your interval structures. small mini arpeggio runs. There's a major into a minor triad into another major triad. And from there, of course, I can then start my 6-string runs where I'm essentially doing Ionian minor 7 into Locrian here where I'm using another minor 7 born from the Phrygian position down into Aeolian using its roots minor 7 and then minor 7 borrowed from Ionian but now played over top of Mixolydian, right? And there it is essentially after that. I can't really remember what I'm doing, and it doesn't really matter because that's the most important part of it right there. There's a few other little pieces that I use there, of course. I'm ascending using this sort of bluesy, tried and true bluesy run too. You'll notice that, and at the very end, you'll notice that I'm actually using the idea of sort of syncing up the guitar stuff with the actual backing track to really punctuate those last few notes. If you didn't notice it, go back and listen to the performance again where you see me really trying to hit that last note perfectly in time with the piano and all the rest of that. Another really important technique for soloing and whatnot. But right there, that sort of ascending. Right, where does that come from? Major scale, 3 notes per string, right? That puts me into Dorian there, of course, and Dorian again, bent, right? And then just ending it. Notice that last note takes off all the tension of the previous wild bends and stuff like that, essentially ends the phrase. So that's real soloing sort of experience right there to be like, okay, I get it now. When I kind of go for that extra one, I almost need to go down again, right, to sort of like bring it back down to home base or wherever it is. So we'll leave it right there for today. But that's a great way of arranging your solos, essentially with an arpeggio sequence, with a hybrid sequence, with some sort of scale sequence, in this case, with the thirds, right, and so on and so forth. The little mini arpeggio sequence, again, using the sort of small triads rather than the big, crazy dominant 7 ones. You get everything in there at the same time. It works every aspect of your game. Done. Let's move on to song number 3. All right, with section 3 here, essentially we're kicking it up several notches, obviously, especially using cadences with respect to the arpeggios to get 2 complementary arpeggios to work together to create a more interesting sound, obviously. So, and later on you can sort of not do it as straightforward as what I'm doing, and I'm trying to just show you how the sounds mesh together rather than try to make them more complicated by essentially doing them really fast or maybe doing them as sequences or as intervals or whatever it is. So just keep that in mind. Later on, you're going to take that basic idea and start messing with it, the sequence and all the rest of that stuff to try to come up with something a lot more interesting. So obviously, starting off here, I'm essentially using the harmonic minor version, right? So it's based around the Locrian position here, but I add some chromaticism there. Right, so it creates a sort of a little bit more sort of like ambiguous scale, if you will, but it's still pretty badass. Right, so I mean, that's basically just me combining the Locrian position here. A flat in this case with the same one, essentially amalgamating them together with the harmonic minor. 2 on this one, then 4 notes, and then back to the Locrian in this case, yeah, you know, and then of course I'm going to do the chromaticism, and then that's from Aeolian. So you can combine those 2 ideas together if you wanted to. fun, right? So it's a great vibe, and this sort of incorporates obviously the more outside sounds into your playing immediately. Once I do that, I go into another arpeggio sequence, but of course now I want to essentially concentrate on creating movement and also resolution, right? So I'm starting off here. Essentially when I come down using this harmonic minor sequence, right? I'm ascending here. Still all harmonic minor. Right there, I'm swapping from this F minor to F major. Right, that's a great tonal center change. It's just me basically playing a major flavor over top of like a minor chord progression or a minor chord sort of vamp, if you will. Right, so that gives me this sort of pivot away from the obvious sort of dissonance, if you will, of the harmonic minor. And from there, of course, I'm now going to jump into an arpeggio sequence. I'm starting here, still thinking of F sharp as major, so might as well use this minor 7 variant based on Ionian, sorry. Jump up to the next one, might not do Dorian, but as a minor 7 flat 5, then jump up again. See this one here as Locrian again, but essentially now superimposing the Phrygian position to create the movement to go back to the major, in this case B major 7, and then just prolonging the B major 7 by using that sort of sequence right there, right? And then of course I've broken it up into 2 sections, so then I'm going to jump up to the next position here. I'm going to use the actual Phrygian position now, if you will, to now play that minor 7 again. It gives my solo continuity, and then of course, sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I couldn't help it. I was like, that sounds cool. There it is. Every time I put the microphone in front of my face, my brain just empties out on the floor. It is what it is, right? So I guess you're starting off with this minor, dominant 7 flavor. And then, of course, classic blues. Right, I spared myself doing that one more time, essentially just ending on the with a third there, but that's a great sequence, and it shows you basically all of the very sort of like complex principles of arpeggios in a relatively simple sequence. You may not be able to play those arpeggios, but it kind of see the superimposition idea, right? Where essentially I'm starting off here with this Ionian position, and then transitioning to the Dorian. But it's superimposed over the notes of B major here, essentially, right? And then moving up here to the next position. In this case, it would be the Locrian, right? So then I can use it again, using this minor 7 to the actual root major. Right? And then, of course, I get to, you know, do it one more time, essentially, by doing it up another position. And, you know, you could sort of, there's the arpeggio. Not my best, right? But you get the idea there is essentially there's so many more tools. Of course, I just use the standard pentatonic kind of idea just to keep it simple. So that right there is a really important sort of sequence of events, starting off with more outside sounds, right? You're like, right? Moving to a new key that's sympathetic to the one you're playing in. Then bringing it back, right, of course, with arpeggios, but now superimposing. Whatever it is, right? I ran out of ideas. It happens. So there it is, essentially, you know, another wrap up, if you will, about how to start to employ some of these ideas. What does superimposition means? It means essentially when I'm thinking about this as the Aeolian position, I can also think about it as Dorian, which means I can now substitute in this arpeggio, or of course, Dominant 7 would have sound probably pretty badass there too. So again, you're like, okay, I'm starting to get a set of mixolydian here. I'm now substituting in major, and I'm like, why not play this minor 7? Because it's kind of like a chameleon-like arpeggio, which means it'll fit in almost everywhere. Obviously, that minor 7 variant, the dominant 7 and diminished are like your best friends. And majors, you just kind of keep in the background, suspended ones too, for like when you want to resolve and be like, I'm done. Right. We'll see how this train wreck turns out. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate every single one of you. Wish you all the best. Practice creatively. Do not just practice in a bubble and be like, oh, read off a sheet. No. Exercise your mind and your fingers at the same time by multiplying all of the different techniques you use into one cohesive practice session where it sounds like music rather than you running through rudiments. See you in the next one.